Hello, hello, and welcome to another episode of Homeschool Moms Unfiltered. I'm your host, Amanda, and my amazing co host is.
Hello, I'm Megan.
Hey, hey. Okay, so this is our weekly book club episode. And the best part of book club is that you can show up every week and listen to the episodes without ever opening a book if you don't want to. And we promise there's absolutely no judgment from us. We are just happy that you're here. So, welcome.
Yeah, welcome. So, if you've been circulating the homeschool world and struggling to find your people because you believe in wacky things like science, gravity, and vaccines,
Yeah. Or women's rights and trans rights, or because you don't decide who has rights and doesn't based on the language they speak, or the color of their skin, or the way that they pray.
we feel you on all of that. In fact, we've been you. Geez, it can be hard to find your people in the homeschool world when you're secular and progressive, but we do, in fact, exist, and there are a lot of us. I mean, we have thousands of podcast downloads to prove it, and not a lot of hate mail to go along with it. So they like it. They're there because they like it.
Mhm.
And a thriving online community. So we are thrilled that you have found us.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, you say thousands, tens of thousands, right? Like we have not to toot our own horn because I still don't exactly believe that it's true and real. And I'm also not saying, hey, please send us hate mail. We do get that. We don't need more of it. But yeah. So anyway, back to book club. We are going to introduce our book and you're going to be like, didn't the other one just say they're secular? And we are. I promise. We swear. Okay. This book does deal with religion, but we're not trying to convert anyone. Like, I don't even church at all myself. That's not what this is about. The reality of the situation, right? We live in a world dominated by religion. So even if you aren't singing worship songs on Saturday, Sunday, and Wednesday, on your way to classical conversations with your kiddos and their matching whatever with their Bibles that have their bookmarks and, like, it does not mean that your kids aren't going to ask questions like Megan's youngest kiddo, who is this Jesus guy I keep hearing about?
True story. He is filled with the big questions.
It's so
We're in the midst of a trilogy of books that were written for approximately ages 8 to 12, and they're just an amazing resource at answering all of those big questions. Like, I mean, what happens after we die is a big one, right? I mean, anybody who's lost a family pet has probably dealt with that question or, a grandparent or whatever. And you're like, well, this series is written by two authors, David McAfee and Chuck Harrison. We already read the Belief book, and you can find those episodes in our queue of episodes there. But last week, we kicked off with our current book, which is the Book of Gods, and we'll be wrapping that one up today.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
Before we dive in, I finally went and looked at the reviews on Amazon because, I needed something to give myself a chuckle. And I absolutely did you see the one of the guy who is, like, positive that this is not appropriate for kids? And, like, his review, he gives it, like, a C based on the fact that it's dumbed down a little too much. It was like, well, you're clearly a grown-up, and it's written for 8 to 12-year-olds, but, like, his whole review is basically about how, like, kids wouldn't find it interesting, and there's nothing in this that would, like, interest kids or encourage them to read, and I'm like, well, I mean, like, I know my kiddo's a bit of an interesting nut, but, like, he's totally reading it with me. Yeah, on the flip side, my dad, because 'cause we're staying with my parents right now, summer vacation and all that jazz, my dad picked it up and was like, "That's a really interesting book." I mean, I'm sure it's a banned book, but it's a really interesting book. It was like, I'm not sure it's even close enough to the libraries and the bookstores where it could be a banned book, but if it was on their radar, I'm certain. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Good point. All right, so let's dive in, right? Our first section this week is called My God is Bigger Than Your God. So I think we both have a similar first note. Do you want to kick us off?
Yeah. So this section just started off on page 58. It says, so far, gods don't sound scary, right? I mean, they never really do anything. So why do people fight with each other over them? And, this is one of those things we've said before in the other books. If you're just tuning in, you should definitely go listen to us talk about the other ones that we've read so far. And the first part of this one, I'm sure that that statement offends plenty of people. They're all, my God does plenty of things. Yeah. Like, true story.
Certainly true, right? And
Mhm.
I really honed in on the part where it said, why do people fight with each other over them? And
Mhm.
it got me thinking, I was like, how many wars have we had that are rooted in religion somewhere in the mix? So that list would be far too long to, I mean, imagine the amount of
Yeah.
research that you would have to put into coming up with that list. So I went online and did research for lists of the longest conflicts, the most let's see, the most culture shifting or globally shifting conflicts, et cetera, that were based on religion. And I mean, we won't go into depth on all of them. We'll be here for the rest of time.
Yeah.
Amanda had previously brought up the Crusades. That was 200 years. We had the 30 Years' War in the 1600s, the French War of Religion in the 1500s, the Spanish Inquisition, the English Reformation, the Troubles in Northern Ireland, as they are referred to, from the 1960s to 1998, which was Catholics versus Protestants. More people are probably familiar with that one because we all remember seeing the IRA and all that kind of stuff on the news as kids. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict, the partition of India, the Lebanese war. I mean, it just keeps going, right? The Sudanese civil wars, the war in Yemen, the Battle of Kosovo, the Maccabean revolt going back to before the Common Era, which is the Israelites waging war against Greek and pagan rule. I mean, this goes back so far. The Muslim conquests in the 7th and 8th centuries, all of this. And it's like, well, yeah, I mean, this is shaped like you said in the intro, right? We live in a world that is dominated by religion. Even if you are not a religious person, look at how it has shaped our world and the amount of conflict, the amount of global conflict that has existed as a result.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
Well, and I mean, I would argue that you could look at just about any culture with indigenous people and
Mhm.
say that the centuries of effort to eliminate them is probably fueled in large part by the fact that their religion is not respected. They are not seen as human because they're not some version of Christianity, which is what has taken hold in most of those cultures where indigenous people are really being wiped out and continue to be. The efforts to eliminate them because they're seen as inferior
Mhm.
in many ways because their religion is quite different.
Mhm.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's true. Yeah. Very true.
So if you have a deep thinker who's reading this along with you, that would be an area. That would be quite the rabbit hole to go down.
It would be, but also good luck.
Yeah. Well, you'll let us know in about a decade when you finished it up.
We're so sorry.
Exactly. Oh, all right. Then I
Well,
think I have the next note
mhm.
on page 60, and it talks about the fact that in any kind of stories, not just religious stories, but any book that you're reading, any movie that you like, anything like that. It talks about the fact that there always needs to be some sort of conflict in a story. And later on page 61, there's this really quite humorous picture that, unlike the review that you talked about, I think kids would find hilarious because I kind of chuckled out loud. And it's a picture of two boxers, but one is Satan and one is Jesus. And they have like six-pack abs and Satan has horns and they've got the gloves on and the whole thing. And it's so this is the version of conflict that's here that they're representing in Christianity. But I thought it's so true. I mean, sometimes I'll be reading a book or I'll be watching a movie and I get really pissed off about something that happens and I'm like, why'd they do that or whatever? Mainly just because I don't want that to happen to the character, right? Like if it's a character that I love and I'm like, I can't believe they killed off that character or they did this or they did that. And then I'm like, well, hold on a second. I'm looking at it as a person who likes that person, not as somebody who makes me, yeah, it would be a really boring movie without that thing, or it would be a really boring book if it was just kind of like everyday life and nothing ever interesting happened. There was no big plot twist or whatever. And so, yeah, that conflict is what keeps people's interest.
Yeah. Although I will totally admit that I am constantly on the lookout for books and shows that are like just enjoyable with not like big conflict. I'm like, why? I don't need that in my life. But yes, I totally agree. On that same page, on page 60, there's this quote that for me, like, just really highlighted this in a nutshell. It says, Batman has his Joker and Jesus has his Satan. One is good while the other is clearly evil. As a species of storytellers, conflict works as the glue that makes our stories stick together. Stories need conflicts to make them interesting. And I mean, especially if you're a homeschool parent, you have probably seen some version of like a graphic organizer for story writing. And it has the climax and the conflict, and your kid's supposed to fill it out before they write their story. Or you've covered those things when you've tried to do some kind of a novel study or whatever. We know you have to have conflict. And the best way to have a conflict is to have a good guy and a bad guy, good and evil. It's not really a surprise that all I'll say almost all religions have this good and evil and their conflict points, right?
Well, and the evil point also is we talked about last week, like that keeping you in line thing, that there's a fear-based component of if you don't do the things you're supposed to do, there's a consequence. And so that brings that side into it as well.
Yeah, for sure. And then, like Meagan said, moving on pages 61 to 63, you go deeper into this discussion about why people hurt each other when they disagree about things, especially in the context of religion. And I thought that this was just a really great point, the way that he kind of goes into it and looks at it, some of the points that he makes. For me, I feel like many religions or belief systems based around a god or gods rely on a pretty deep level of indoctrination. And that makes it pretty hard for people to just say, like, oh, that's different from what I believe, but I'm okay with that. The level of indoctrination that has to go into that belief system makes it so that many people, I won't say all, but many people really kind of fall into this like, well, you have to believe what I believe. Like this is right. You have to believe it. And they really struggle with that. Like, like that's cool. I'm glad that works for you. Are you open to being happy that what I believe works for me? That gets a lot harder with a lot of belief systems. Not all, but a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, makes sense. All right. Our next section, I loved the title because I knew exactly where we were going the second it popped up. It's called Why is Grandma Talking to Her Food?
Yeah.
And it was like, I know where we're heading right now.
So it starts on page 64, and it starts off by saying, quote, "We all do some strange, silly things, but when a lot of people do the same strange thing, it is seen as normal, like singing in the shower or talking to yourself when there's no one else in the room." And for me, it was that thing, like, where this is going, and I'm totally loving it, even though, again, I'm sure it's going to make people real mad.
Yep. All right. Then we've talked about the fact that these books are kind of chock full of definitions in a really engaging way. It's not boring dictionary approach to definitions. So we've got the definition of prayer here and kind of an explanation of what that is and how it is incorporated into religion, which is lovely. Then there's a section here about idolatry and how some religions are okay with symbols of their gods and others aren't. Like, and I mean, I don't even mean like, necessarily statues where you're like bowing down in front of statues and things like that. But even like in Christianity and Catholicism, there's paintings of God and Jesus and like, I mean, the Sistine Chapel ceiling, right? Like all this stuff is a huge part of that. And like in Judaism, you don't have that at all. There's no, the decorations in a synagogue are usually like floral mosaics and they're stained glass because there's none of that. So it's different. But it reminded me so this past weekend was the No Kings protest in the United States. And I saw a number of signs that toyed with that concept of Christianity and idolatry. And I loved them. So there was one that I saw that said like, hey, Christians, Trump is your golden calf and stuff like that. It was kind of these biblical references of like, you are idol worshiping. It's a living person. It's not a statue. It's not a deity. It's a reality TV star host. But yeah, you're doing it.
Yes. Yeah, convicted felon reality TV star host. I know.
Exactly.
Idol. Yeah. Okay, so next for me, it was on page 67. The quote I pulled out is, "Some believers also talk to their gods because a lot of religions say that people are not all that great and they are filled with sin." And I think for me, this is an often overlooked point, especially for atheists. Again, in my opinion, I think a lot of times atheists forget how much religions will often rely on this idea that people are bad fundamentally and that they are born filled with sin, or they're born and automatically bad and they have to give themselves over to their religion, or they have to be baptized to be good, or they have to, these kinds of things. And I think that if you want to educate your kids about religion and you really want them to understand religion and religious trauma, that it is important to talk about that initial belief of you're born bad, because that will help your kids understand why so many people think they can't do good things unless they have religion, because they've been taught that you can't do good things unless you have religion. That's part of their fundamental belief. So if you don't tackle that, I feel like your kids will miss a big part of the understanding.
Yeah. Well, and I think it helps with that mentality too of why there is this compulsion to fix that stain that you've been born with, this endless need to work hard and overcome that because you don't really know when it's enough.
Mm,
There's no boundary, there's no definition of what that looks like. And so people have this thought process that you're eternally working to fix that thing.
yeah.
Talk about
Yeah.
stressful.
Yeah. No anxiety here.
Yeah. I have enough of that. I don't need to add any more to it. Um, yeah. Then on 68, there was a part that I loved here when it was talking about giving thanks to whatever your God of choice is for food. And it's talking about the logic behind that. So on 68, it says, "But you know, a God didn't give that food to your family, don't you? Maybe you were at the store when they bought the groceries, or you remember your parents working hard to get the money for them. Was there a God going to work every day? Do gods do your food shopping?" And so it's just a very practical approach of looking at, like, well, hold on a second. My parents worked really, really hard for this, and acknowledging what they've done. I mean, we had that in the last section too, where it was talking about like the love of God. And it was like, but hold on, does God drive you to baseball practice? Does God read you a bedtime story? No, those are your parents. That's the meaning of, or your caretakers or your loved ones or whoever might be in your life. So yeah.
Yeah.
Then continuing on that page, there's a section here talking about prayer again. And there's just this one little line, and it says, people do this with other things too. And it says, when grandpa has a friend who's sick and he doesn't think he can do anything to help, he might be able to ask for help from his gods. And I'm like, for me, this worked in the completely opposite regard. And not necessarily for a grandparent, an older person who's ill, but we've talked before on the podcast about the fact that my husband is a cancer survivor and had a very, very long, intense fight. We spent 2 years in the main core of it. I mean, obviously, for years after that, there were still appointments and stuff like that. But the 2 years was like weekly appointments, if not daily, sometimes twice daily visits to hospitals when he was inpatient and stuff like that. And I've talked about the fact that where he was in the hospital was valet parking only because it was downtown Miami. There was no big parking lot, no big parking garage. And so invariably you'd have to stand outside waiting for your car to be brought back around because it was somewhere far away in some lot that was blocks away. And I would see these mostly mothers standing there with these children who were barely alive, limp noodle bodies of children who had been chemoed to within an inch of their life and just had nothing left in them in their fight, right? And I'm looking at that and I'm like, you're going to tell me that this is all some sort of master plan of some benevolent God, that this is, because that's the thing, right? It's all part of God's plan. You don't know, right? You don't know it right now, but someday it might reveal itself to you that this is, and I'm like, whose fucking plan is this? Because this is cruelty. There's nothing for this child and for this mother. I can't even imagine being these mothers who are holding their kids down when painful things are being done to them, like all that. You're telling me that this is part of a plan and that I should be on board with this plan and that
Yeah. Of a benevolent God.
of a benevolent God, and that some deity did this to this child, but then me sitting there and going, please help this child, that what, they're going to reverse course and be like, maybe I shouldn't have given that kid such horrendous cancer. Like so for me, I went completely the opposite way. Like I just sat there and thought, there's no way that this is part of some sort of master plan. And if it is, I don't want any fucking part of it. Right. I mean, whatever that is, it's awful.
Yeah.
So there's no unseeing all of that. I mean, we were there. At one point, my husband was in the ICU for 28 days. You see a lot in 28 days in the ICU, and it's not good. It's not, I'm not buying the master plan concept.
Yeah. But it is interesting how often, and we talked about this, I don't think it was in this book. I think it was in the belief book that we did first. But that idea that like when you don't have control over something,
Yeah.
many people find comfort in being able to believe that someone else has control over it, right? And that gives them a sense of peace because then it's not their fault. It's out of their control. And the thing is I think we can all, for the most part, agree that that stuff is out of our control.
Yeah.
It's out of your control. But there are people who need to be able to blame it on something else. And then there are other people who are able to just be like, well, that's just, there are things in life that are out of our control.
Well, and my husband and I had this conversation the other night. We were talking about somebody that's in our sphere who went from not being religious to all of a sudden being like a pretty regular at Bible study. And which is interesting because we're Jewish and they worked, in that world as well. And I was like, we were talking about it and he was kind of like, I don't even know what the hell happened. And I go, yeah, but this person lost a child lost a full-term baby in pregnancy. And I'm like, Judaism doesn't promise you're going to get to hold your baby again, right? Bible study does. There's this time you're going to be reunited with your baby and you're going to get to hold your baby and you're going to have this entire existence. And listen, that is trauma that I can't even imagine going through. So I'm not going to sit here and say like, oh, how ridiculous. If I was in that position, would I choose the thing that promises me I get to hold my baby again? I might. Heck yeah, right? I mean, you don't know unless you've been in that position. So I get it. I do. I totally get it. And none of us really know what happens. So it's like, I have no idea. I mean, we could all be earthworms or we could be lightning bugs. I have no idea, right? I just finished watching that show, the Four Seasons with Tina Fey and Steve Carell. Have you seen it?
No.
And this one, somebody dies and this one guy who's kind of an eccentric character is like, he's a butterfly now. And his partner is like, he's not a freaking butterfly. He's dead. Like, and it's this whole debate about what happened. So like, I get it. I mean, it's hard. Everybody's walking their own journey. So it's really hard. All right. We have more to talk about. However, we've been sharing updates about the future of book club. We have recorded something like 60 book club episodes at this point, which is super exciting. The other day, we were kind of reminiscing about all the books that we've read in book club, and we've covered a lot of ground.
Yeah.
But come September, we are going to be shifting book club over to Patreon. You can join as an all access member and have access to book club, or when it gets a little bit closer, we will also have just a book club level that you can join and you can just come to book club. You can still show up without reading the book. It's not like now because it's on Zoom, you have to all of a sudden start reading the book. We still don't judge. You can come, bring a glass of wine, put your hair in a messy bun, like no one cares. But the goal is to build community, grow with one another on a deeper level than the two of us just sitting here kind of talking out into the ether and having these conversations. So we will link the information in our show notes to our Patreon. You can come check it out. For now, I would say at a minimum, just come join as a free member, because if your sole goal is book club, at least as a free member, when we launch that book club only membership tier, you'll know about it right away. We'll give you a coupon code. You'll be all set. Amanda puts out a newsletter for the free members every month. So there's plenty of advantage to coming over and just hanging out with us just for updates and things like that. But if you do want to come and join us as an all access member, now we are still meeting live. We meet every single week live. We talk about neurodivergent homeschooling. We do a Q&A. We have a social. Come hang out with us. You can use code bookworm, all one word, And that'll give you 90% off your first month over on Patreon. So we would love to invite you over there. This is a great time to join too, because we're running a poll right now for the fall so that we know when to schedule a book club. It'll be twice a month. And we want to know what days and times work well for you so that rather than the two of us just picking it out of the sky, we have a better idea of what's happening. I mean, Amanda and I live 8 hours apart in time zones. It gets a little hairy trying to schedule stuff. So go ahead and let us know what works.
And it's always like, well, if we do this one early in the afternoon for your time, then the people who are logging on from Central Time Zone are trying to make dinner. And, but like if we push it out and do it at this time, for West Coast time, then the East Coast people are maybe getting ready for bed. And it's truly the middle of the night for you. And like, so come let us know what works for you. We will try to make it work for the vast majority of people so that it's not just us like making our best guess.
Yeah. Our social is usually at about 2:30 in the morning for me, but it's fun enough that I stay awake. So I'm like, okay, I'm good. Yeah. So, and our first book that we'll be reading in the fall is a book by the guy who invented Khan Academy, Salman Khan. And it's going to be talking about AI in education. And he thinks it's a great thing. And we're going to have our own conversation once we've read the book to see if we agree with him or not, So come join us.
Yeah, that's it. It's going to be an interesting conversation because I'm not a big fan of AI, but at the same time, like the horse is out of the barn. So where does he see the advantages and where, like what good things does he see coming out of it and where are the areas that we really do need to be careful or cognizant of? So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I had almost read it and then I'm glad I held off because it's better when it's a first read for book club. I'm not very good about rereading things. Okay, so let's get back to the book. Our next chapter is called, Does Everyone Have a God? It starts on page 70. My first note was on page 71, and I pulled the quote from the book. It says, some people believe in one God, and they are called monotheists. If you believe in more than one God, you're a polytheist. But what about someone who doesn't believe in any deities? I thought it was interesting that he switched to the word deities because I feel like some people would get their hackles up a little around that, but it's true.
A little less offensive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what about someone who doesn't believe in any deities? That person is called an atheist. And for me, I just really love how simple this definition is. It's like, if you believe in one God, it's this. If you believe in many gods, it's this. If you don't believe in any gods, it's this. Because I grew up in a religious household, in a extended family and community that was very religious. I definitely went to church more than once a week. And I was involved in a lot of things into my 20s. And when I moved away from that, when I walked away from that, this idea of saying that I was an atheist, it was really hard. It was really hard to be able to admit it, to even really come to terms with it, because it is just made out to be such a bad, bad thing by so many. Like, you're a devil worshiper, you're like just these things that like that's not the definition of it. And so yeah, I really liked that definition. And then I just thought this whole page 71 was really good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I liked it. It was just it's laid out in just a very factual way.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So then that brings me, I have the next one as well. It's on page 74. And it's just a discussion about why some people believe in gods and others don't. And, look, this is not exactly new in this series, but I am sure the way that it's laid out and presented, it's helpful for some kids. And none of the reasons laid out have anything to do with the devil winning. So there
you go. Oh, I like it. All right. Here's the piece that you brought up earlier on 75 was my next note. And it says, thinking someone else is in control can help people feel better about bad things in life. But some don't need that at all, really. And so, again, I literally wrote in my notes, again, kids with cancer. Nope. If someone has made this choice for a bad thing, if somebody, right, there's this whole like bad things happen to good people. And so if there is some sort of all powerful being out there who is like, what bad things should I have happen to a good person today? And that's like, I think terminal brain cancer for this 5-year-old is, yes, we haven't done that one in a while. Let's throw that one out there and jazz things up a little bit. Like, fuck that. No, I'm sorry, but no.
Yeah. Or the people who are like, well, it happened because you're not a believer. Like, fuck that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm like, nope, I'm out.
Hmm.
And then I really liked this paragraph on the next page, which for me is 75. And so it says, unlike believers, atheists know that there is no amount of prayer or rain dancing that will change certain things in life. Atheists might even work harder in life to get things done or to help others because they don't believe in an afterlife created by gods. And I thought that was really interesting because I feel like right now in our society, we're in this place where all of the social structures, the safety nets in society are being removed because nobody wants to pay for them. And when I say nobody, I mean the people in charge. And so part of it just kind of makes me wonder if this plays a role in any of that. Is it just miserly behavior, or is it like, is that part of that, like picking yourself up by your bootstraps and all that kind of stuff? Whereas for me, I liked this part. Atheists might even work harder in life to get things done or to help others because they don't believe in an afterlife created by gods. And how much of that impacts this earth as well, where no one else is coming to fix this problem. No one else is going to take care of your neighbor. They can pray for a job all day long, or they can pray for food to put on the dinner table all day long. Their kids' tummies are still grumbling at night. So why don't you make a double batch of lasagna and bring a tray over? And so, I don't know. We talked in the main episode this week about how the world is on fire right now, like more so than it has been even since January. And I'm like pretty pissed off this week. So I think it's definitely spilling over into my book notes. I apologize. But I'm like, I can't. I'm tired of living in crazy town. Every day the news gets worse and I'm over it. And I think there's a huge tie-in to religion in all of this that's happening. I mean, I talked in the main episode about the fact that I watched the full 2-hour interview with Tucker Carlson and Rafael Cruz, who I refuse to call Ted. And, the number of times that they cited religion and God and the Bible and this and that when they're talking about all these world events. And I'm like, I don't need to live my life based upon what's in the Bible. I don't. This is not a requirement for me. I don't believe in the Bible. So shut up and govern the country. Read the Constitution, read the Bill of Rights, read the amendments. Those are the things that govern our country. The Bible is not one of them. In fact, those documents specifically say that the Bible isn't one of them. So could we please? So I'm just done. I'm having a week. Sorry.
No, yeah. I'm there with you.
Okay,
I think it'd be awesome if they'd read the Constitution and actually use it, besides quoting. But I mean, they use it the same way they use the Bible. They quote their favorite cherry pick or the others. Like, oh,
exactly.
I don't like that section. Like,
yeah,
due process. No.
If a man lies with another man, and it's like, here they were eating like a shrimp cocktail, and I'm like, well, come again.
Yeah, good times. All right, so the next chapter is called Higher Power Rangers. Starts on page 77. I gotta say, I didn't really understand this chapter, especially at the beginning. I was like, what? I read it probably like 3 times trying to understand what the hell he was trying to get at. It got a bit better, but still, like the whole chapter, I was just like, I was a little confused by it. So I'm curious your thoughts on it. And also, like by the end of the chapter, I kind of felt like, in a nutshell, this chapter was basically like, turn the other cheek, which I thought was super bizarre because that's totally a Christian mythology story. And I was like, that is so, I don't know. So yeah.
I have some notes as we go through. Oh yeah, I have some notes for sure. I mean, I got
some notes too. Like,
I got what he was trying to say, right? Where it's somebody who knows the reality of all of these things, right? Beliefs, gods, religions, all this kind of stuff, and how they should conduct themselves as like this superhero thing. I had some issues, and I think from the notes that you wrote down, maybe we are in alignment on this with how he would like those people to conduct themselves.
Yeah.
So we can explore that. But I think that was like the overarching theme of the chapter.
Yeah. I think it's supposed to be a play on like the actual Power Rangers, like the
Mhm.
colors, like they wore different colors. But I never really watched the Power Rangers. So I think I kind of missed that. And my kiddo's not into that kind of thing. And so like
Mm-mm.
I missed that. But I think it was, yeah, the idea of the actual Power Rangers like fighting for good because that's how these things always work. And then like you're supposed to be fighting for good as like a higher Power Ranger who knows better than to fall for religion, I guess, is kind of how it was like positioned or something. But yeah, it took me a long time to figure out that that's what he was getting at. On page 78, there's an activity. It's the first activity in this chapter. And it was what helped me start being like, oh, I think maybe, right? Because you're supposed to pretend that you are a higher power ranger and he wants to know what you've done with your powers. And he says, quote, "Are you going to beat up discrimination or save your whole family from false beliefs?" I was like, "Oh, are you going to teach people not to be so judgmental?" Like, good luck with that. You can do anything. And I was like, "Oh, okay." I mean, like, maybe I understand where he's going with this. Maybe I'm still completely lost and confused.
No, I think you're onto it. That's basically what I got from it. So I think we're kind of in alignment. I think where we both struggled with some issues potentially was on page 80, where he says, so this is like the code of conduct, if you will, for a higher power ranger, which was higher power rangers shouldn't be mean to people who believe differently, hurt others, discriminate against anyone for any reason, act like they are better than others, call people bad names, insult anyone's faith, or call people stupid for their ideas. And I read that a few times. That was one where I was like, I took each individual section and was like, hmm. And I mean, again, I've been feisty all day today. So here it goes. This book is a little bit older, right? I think 2016, 2018. I don't remember. Like, did they realize that we were going to be living in Gilead at this point? Like, I'm sick of the Bible trying to run my life. And I'm going to fight back to a certain point. Like, I'm not just going to sit there and be like, well, your beliefs are your own. I mean, yesterday, okay, it's June 19th. Yesterday, Adriana Smith, a woman in Georgia who'd been kept alive as a human incubator, had a baby cut out of her dead body. I'm so sick of seeing that she gave birth because a dead person cannot give birth.
Mhm.
And I'm overplaying nice. I mean, this was a literal scene from The Handmaid's Tale. They literally had this scene in The Handmaid's Tale at one point. So basically, a lot of Christianity in the United States has become religious extremism, right? And it's become mainstream. And I'm not going to sit here and be a higher power ranger and play along with the fact that I'm okay with this. Like other forms of religious extremism, the KKK, the Taliban, like were people supposed to be like with the Taliban, like we agree to disagree. We don't interpret the Quran the same way, but it's okay. Like no, right? And I get it. It's made for kids and whatever, but I kind of feel like at the same time, it's setting kids up for this, like, you can't be critical of things that are harmful to other people. Like when people are using their religion to preach harm to other people, I don't think kids need to sit there and be okay with that.
Yeah. I mean, we talk more about it in the next section, but for me, I struggled with this page. It's on page 80, and there are the two lists of what kids should or how kids should and shouldn't behave. And I don't really like it. On the flip side, it's one of those things, right? When I first read them, I was like, eh. But when I went back and really went like piece by piece, I'm like, okay, well, with an 8 to 12-year-old, but definitely on the younger end of it, I don't think that any of these lessons are lessons that any parent would be like, I don't want my child to learn this lesson. Like as a fundamental lesson,
Correct.
like how we behave, they're all things that are like, yes, of course, those are things we're going to teach our young children. I just I guess, and I'm sure in large part it's because of the state of the United States, especially right now. And I say that because I have lived overseas multiple times. I have some really devout religious friends from other countries who were far more accepting and far more open to the fact that I was like very proudly atheist. And, you know, we had very respectful relationships. And I just really struggle to find those types of relationships in the United States. And so it's probably colored by that, the fact that this list of things that I'm like, well, generally speaking, I think, we want our kids to do all of these things or not do all of these things. When put in the context of a book about gods and religions, I was like, I don't know so much about that. That's where it gets tricky. But we do talk about it a little bit more in the next chapter as well. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's a little tricky. No, it's a lot tricky. It's not a little, it's a lot tricky. We'll put that out there. But again, the point of these books, they're not huge books. They're 90 pages or less each one. The point is to be able to have these conversations, to open up this dialogue and to guide you in having these conversations with your kids. And so I think from that regard, it does a good job of it.
Mm-hmm. All right. So next section is called, Is This It? This is how I feel in general.
Yeah. Is this it? Is this all there is?
Really? Okay, here we go. And I think you have the first note here.
I do. So this, and again, maybe I was a little feisty reading it and we rolled right into it, right? So this section, it started on page 83. My first note wasn't until 87, but the quote says, well, we know all about the different gods and that believing in them helps some people, but not others. And we understand that we should respect people and their beliefs, even if we don't share them. And I'm like, I don't know. I think this is hard because in our home, we definitely teach that respect is a two-way street. You don't have to give someone respect if they aren't giving it to you. Now, I don't teach like, well, if they're not giving you respect, you should stick around and be an asshole to them, right? Like, that's not necessarily what we're teaching. But we're also, it's not like well, they can be as awful as they want and you still have to give them respect. Like, leave the situation. You don't have to give respect to them for no reason. And so then I feel like, yeah, when it comes to differences of opinion and religion, I'm not sure how often respect is actually a two-way street. And so, yeah. But again, the book is meant to open a conversation, a discussion, a dialogue between kids and their caregivers and help you. And that's a big part of why we chose to review these books. They get recommended all of the time. We had talked about them, we've recommended them, but we hadn't actually done like a deep dive of what these books say and whether or not they're any good and if they're actually helpful. And so, I do think they do a good job of giving you lots of things to talk about, even if you don't 100% agree with the way it's positioned, or if it's like, well, on a surface level, I agree with what it's saying. But if we're going to do some critical thinking around this, what do we think there? And how does that actually connect with what our family values are and what we teach and those kinds of things?
Yeah, I completely agree with what you're saying. I got towards the end of this, I started getting a little like, but agree. It's that balance too of age appropriateness and having those conversations and all of that. So, and time and place. This was written before we had descended even as far as we have now, and got and how, who knows how far we will continue to descend into religious extremism. So I think it's a different, we're reading it through the lens of what is happening right now and all of these things that we're seeing, all the love thy neighbor crowd out there reporting their neighbors to ICE, like while voting for a felon. I can't reconcile all of this with them then putting on their cute outfits and doing their outfit of the day Instagram video to go to church. I can't, right? I'm done.
Yeah.
So,
no, fair enough. Okay, so then we're almost done. The book wraps up with an intro for the next book. And so the next book is called The Book of Religions. We are going to dive into that next week. And I just liked the kind of the intro for it, right? So it has some questions that have me pretty excited to see exactly what it says. So there's, what makes a religion a religion? Should I be afraid of them? Where do they come from? where do they go and why are there so many of them? And yeah, so I'm like, oh, I'm excited to see, yeah, kind of where the next book goes. I have not been disappointed with either book. There are, again, it's that thing. There are definitely things where I'm like, but then at the same time, it is written for younger kids. It's written to be a jumping off point. And I think if there was a book like this really trying to dive into when do you show respect and all of that, it would be much more limiting, right? Because how different families handle that and what that looks like and all of that. And so, you know, yeah, all in all, I think still good, still happy
Yeah.
we're doing it and good for what it is, for what it's supposed to be. This is not a parenting how-to book. This is a let's talk about these things and figure out what we believe and why we believe them and where we fall on this spectrum and where other people are and all of that. Yeah.
hmm Yeah. And I don't think there's a better resource out there that we've come across so far
No.
either. So there's a resource, which is great.
Yeah. I
Take it.
think there is actually something. Okay, so we're almost done, but right before we close up, we just want to remind you that we have a buy me a coffee or buy us a coffee. And like there are links, you can click on a link, you can just go into Google and type buy me a coffee, homeschool moms unfiltered will come up. It's just an easy way. If you don't want to join a membership, you don't want to do X, Y, or Z or sign up for our free Patreon account or whatever, you can just say, like, hey, I really appreciate what you're doing. A lot of creators out there are offering this option as a way to just support content creation that is not like ad heavy with ridiculous, hey, we're pushing all of these resources that we would never actually use ourselves. This is a way to just be like, we really appreciate what you're putting out there. Please keep doing it. It starts at $5. It goes up from there. And yeah, it makes our day. And yeah, the little bit of help and support, it's weird doing podcasts because you put stuff out there and then you get some comments back, but it's always nice when there's feedback, right? Did anyone hear me out there?
So true. I know it does. It feels good when stuff comes back and we're like, oh my gosh, they're real people. Last year, right around this time, actually, we were new at podcasting. I mean, we had only been putting episodes out for a month or two at that point. And I went to a homeschool conference and I knew somebody who was at the homeschool conference. And she came up to me at one point and was like, come here, come here, come here. I'm like, okay. And she had met somebody who listened to our podcast and was like, and I was like, oh my gosh. I texted Amanda. I was like, I just met a real person in real life who listens to our podcast because we were so new. So it was so awesome.
I have a local co-op that I participate in occasionally in the Facebook group for. There was this discussion and someone is getting ready to do an article, like a newspaper article, and they wanted people who could weigh in on different things. And I was like, oh, I have experience with this, this, and this. And if it matters, I co-host a podcast that's about homeschooling. And so like that might be helpful for whatever you're doing. I'm happy to talk to you. And the person who coordinates the co-op was like, oh, I love a good podcast. What's your podcast? And I was like, oh, it's, Homeschool Moms Unfiltered, blah, 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 blah. And she was like, I just realized that I have been listening to your podcast for a really long time. But like, it's that weird thing, right? Where like sometimes like worlds overlap. It's fun. Random.
I know it feels good when it happens. I'm like,
Yeah. That's me. I'm that Amanda. Not that you would know. Everyone knows a million Amandas that are our age. So like you would never be like, oh, are you the Amanda from the podcast? Megan's kind of the same. Megan and Amanda. Not many people are going to be like, oh, I think that you are the Megan from the podcast that I listen to.
you must be the one, right? Well, and neither one of us like put our last names out there are you don't share your kiddo's name. So there's no other like where somebody would put multiple factors together and be able to string them together and be like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
so
Yep.
yeah. So it's always fun when it happens in real life. We're like,
Yeah, for sure.
all right, friends, I am going to attempt to go walk off my feistiness. It's not going to work. Like, first of all, I'm on Aruba, which is my husband's home country. We're here visiting. It's only 6 miles wide by about 21 miles long. And I'm pretty damn feisty with the current state of the world. So I could walk the entire island and I think still not have quite walked in. Because it's not that big of an island. I need like Forrest Gump levels of running from coast to coast, I think, at this point, in order to put a dent in my feist. But yeah, I'm going to go for a nice walk on the beach and try to over the state of the world.
I'm going to go drink margaritas and eat too many chips and salsa. So yours is definitely a healthier way to deal with it, but I'm going to enjoy my margarita as my way of dealing with it. So,
I'll walk a few extra steps for you. So it'll be good. We'll balance each other out.
yeah, thank you. Thank you for that.
So, friends, we will join you next week for the third and final book of our trilogy. We'll be reading the first half next week and then the next half the following week. But in the meantime, try and take a deep breath because I don't think it's getting better anytime soon. And at some
No.
point, we need to breathe. So take a deep breath and happy homeschooling.
Yeah, hope you have a great one.